slowly falling apart. So, but yeah, Botanist should be also a fun one. So Botanist is also a really complicated one that I think guilds will have a lot of difficulty with because of a number of mechanics that it has and how they interact with each other. Star Augur, I think, is super easy. Kroos is super easy. Grand Magistrix, Star Augur, and Botanist are a little bit more complicated, and you'll see exactly why. So we will pull up Tali's video. Where are you? Tali, hi, Botanist Tel'arn. All right. So High Botanist. He is a big weed drug dealer or whatever. He is a really cool fight because I've always wanted a fight like this, where it's, you know, typical council fights are like, okay, so it's really hard at the start. You guys remember the council Throne of Thunder? Really hard at the start, easier and easier and easier as it went on, right? In general, because you killed some of the council. Other councils share HP, so when they share HP, you know, you just deal with the same thing over and over and over. This one is a lot more fun because it gets more complicated as the fight goes on. It turns into, from a single boss encounter to a council-style boss encounter. Where are you, High Botanist? Okay. The first one is a tank debuff swap. It gives you 15% more physical strike damage, so it's something for the tanks to deal with. Recursive strikes on Deadman, taunt now, so Tali taunts, and now the boss is on him. Now, the first ability, and this ability happens throughout the entire encounter, is called Solar Collapse. It will target a random player. It could be a tank, a healer, I don't know, sorry, not sure for the tank, but melee, healer, or ranged DPS. And it's going to spawn multiple yellow circles or balls and bring them closer and closer and closer. Your job is to dodge them. If you're good at dodging balls on Chromatic Anomaly, this will be pretty easy as well. As you can see them, that's where they spawn, and they get closer and closer and closer to their intended target. Well, if you know they target ranged, healers, or melee, you know that you can dodge these really well, or you can bait them. So it gets closer and closer, and as it gets closer, it's obviously much more difficult to dodge, so it's a real pain in the ass if it is on melee. And I can't remember if it's ever targeted on melee here, or it might have been healers standing in melee, but yeah, anyway. So then you can see it get closer and closer until it's really hard to dodge, and then you basically die. It does something like 3 million damage, so it may not kill you, but if you get hit by 2, it's probably going to murder you. So don't get hit by it. There's Recursive Strikes. Now, Parasitic Fever. So right now, Indy on the raid frames has Parasitic Fever. Basically what it does is it roots you in place. Well, when you're rooted, you can't dodge mechanics. It sucks. It's a dot, it gets stronger, and you can't move. So what you have to do is, as a healer, dispel these people right away. It's Fetter, sorry, not Fever. So dispel them. It comes like once every 35 seconds. Dispel them. But when you dispel them, it spawns 2 flowers. Watch what happens. Where is it? Did they spell him? Somewhere out. You can't see it on the screen here. He's off to my left side, or to the left side where, yeah, where the fireballs are going right now. Basically, it spawns 2 flowers. Those flowers will fixate 2 random players. If they fixate and they hit you with a melee swing, they will infect you with the same debuff. And you have to dispel that person, which spawns 2 more flowers. So the goal is dispel somebody right away, stun lock, blow up those flowers, and if they're not targeted on you, blow them up. But if they are targeted on you, do not let them hit you, whatever it takes. One good thing is so 2 people will get targeted. If those 2 people are nearby, they will not run off into random directions. So you can't see it here. Hopefully we'll see it later on in the fight. And then the last ability is Controlled Chaos. You can see Controlled Chaos Dodge Attack. That's basically Manaroth's Felseeker. If you guys remember Manaroth, Felseeker, starts small, gets bigger, bigger, bigger. It does raid-wide damage, but if you're standing inside the purple circle, you will die. So you can see everybody running away from the purple circle. It's getting bigger. It's really hard to see. My hope, devs, if you're listening, Glyph and the rest of you guys, you've made it, easier to see by making it darker or something like that. Because it is a bitch to see right now. There's Solar Collapse again. That's targeted on another ranged player, so they're trying to run away. And that's pretty much it for the first phase. You're dealing with the Solar Collapse, you're dealing with the Parasites, which you're dispelling, killing ads, and Controlled Chaos. And tanks are dealing with their own Recursive Strikes. So, pretty simple first phase. But it gets... they're going to be fun in LFR. We'll see what happens in LFR. So we'll see. Does Hand of Freedom get rid of the root? I would imagine it works in either two ways. If you use Hand of Freedom, it'll either remove the root component so you can move, or it'll just dispel. Again, I wasn't on this one. I wasn't able to test it. Maybe other paladins can check or can let us know. But it's either going to remove the root component or it's going to dispel, which is going to do the exact same thing anyway. The goal is to dispel it right away because you don't want to have somebody rooted who can no longer dodge the Fel Seeker, right? The controlled chaos or the Star Collapse or the later mechanics. So this is phase 1 in a nutshell. Recursive strikes, parasitic lash. There you go. You can see them in the right side there. Those are parasitic lashers. So you can stun them, knock them back, whatever, but they will fixate people. So right now it's fixated on Galvin on the right side and Natoro. They can't let them get hit by him. And they die pretty quickly, so they're not, super, super, super deadly. But they're super annoying if you don't control them well. So again, controlled fight. There we go. This one's on melee. This sucks. This sucks a lot because you're going to need to run out early, or else you'll get murdered if you're standing there. Everybody moved out? Perfect. Next parasitic is on Natoro. Natoro's going to get dispelled. In a second there, we got dispelled. And now they need to... And then who's fixated? Carbona and Altaris. So you can see the lashes getting frozen, stunned, DPS, whatever you can. Now at this point, he splits off into two. So High Botanist keeps his High Botanist abilities, and he turns into Solaris. So he has solar abilities. So High Botanist, he loses his Sun ability, which was the big Sun Sphere, but Solaris now gains it. So you're dealing with the same abilities in phase 1, so Parasitic Fetter. You're still dealing with the big Fel Seeker ability, and now you're dealing with phase 2, so you'll have a new ability. So still the Star Collapse as well, but Solaris is doing that, not High Botanist. And the new ability for this one, there's two. Number 1 is Flare, which is a tank ability. Don't stand in your tanks. It's not a ton of damage either way. But Plasma Spheres. They are the big component to phase 2. You can see them. They're the big gold balls. I know Blizzard loves balls. So they're these big balls that basically they do nothing. They don't attack. They do nothing. They take damage over time and they kill themselves. The issue is when they explode, and they explode on the raid, for 5 seconds they will give you a debuff where you take 100% more damage. If all 3 plasma spheres explode at the same time, you wipe. So the thing to do is kill one at a time. Blow up the first one. You can see the debuff ticking on the right side there. It's about to expire. Then you kill the second one. Plasma sphere is low. And wait for the debuff to expire. And kill the third one and control it. Where's the third sphere? There's the third sphere exploding now. So that way the raid does not wipe, and the damage is fairly staggered. And that's pretty much it for phase 2. I mean, it's pretty easy. He transitions pretty quickly. This is where the damage and you cleave classes will ramp up tremendously, because now you're dealing with 2 bosses and now 3 bosses. So phase 2, really simple. Again, just those plasma spheres are the big one. Focus one down, so as DPS, if you're able to switch quickly, focus one down, let the debuff expire, kill the second one, let the third one do its own little thing. And then you'll transition to phase 3. So you're still dealing with Solarist, which does solar abilities. You're dealing with the with Arcanist, which is the new one, and Naturalist. So the Botanist and the Arcanist, they've split off. They do their own things now. The first new ability is you see these toxic spores, green spores. You guys remember doing Nax 25 or Nax 40 for you old school people? Little spores floating around, can't be targeted. Well, I guess those were targetable, but they're just little spores floating around. These ones are green. They're completely avoidable. They just float around doing their own little thing. Don't run into them. If you run into them, you take a 12-second dot. You run into too many of them, you'll die. What you could do is you could have like somebody like a paladin use their Crusader steed, run into a bunch of them, bubble them off, give your raid a little bit more room. There we go. Again, it's pretty straightforward here. So spores are the new ability. Grace of Nature is the other one. Grace of Nature is basically they're going to drop a healing circle under the bosses. Well, how do you not deal with the healing circle healing the bosses? Well, just drag the bosses out. Super easy. So in 30 seconds, hopefully he's still alive for it to cast here. There's the Fel Seeker still. That all still happens. The spheres should still be happening. Everything's still happening as before. right? So this one gets really, really complicated. It's where you want to start heroing, blowing it up. There's the Plasma Sphere, so you're dealing with that. You're dealing with the Fel Seekers. You're dealing with the debuff that you have to dispel. You're dealing with the Yads that you have to kill. You're dealing with the Spores that you have to dodge. And you're going to deal with Call of the Night here in a second. And Call of the Night is the Arcanist ability, and he targets random players. So you'll see, who's it on? He targeted Spooky, Psycho, and somebody else. And basically, you are doing raid-wide damage. If you are targeted by this thing, you are doing raid-wide damage unless one of your friends comes over to you. So if one of your raiders, let's say I have it, and if one of my raiders comes over to me, then the raid does not take damage, only us two do. So you guys are now paired. You should always be moving together so the raid does not take that damage, but you two will. That's Call of the Night, essentially. Targets 2 or 3 players depending on your raid size, and you don't want to blow up the entire raid. Stay nice and close together. And here comes Grace of Nature. Watch what happens. There, big green circle under the bosses. Just move the bosses out. And you can see when he starts casting it. So when the Naturalist, which is the one that casting it, is casting it, just start dragging the bosses out immediately, and eventually he'll just jump right over to you. But it is a pretty cool encounter. Again, lots of stuff to dodge. The mechanics get more and more complicated, but it's great because it introduces you to the mechanics slowly over time rather than like bum rushing you with 20 different mechanics. There, and they killed High Botanist. I believe this was on normal. I can't recall. Yeah, it might have been normal. Yeah, I mean, pretty good encounter, pretty fun, lots of things to manage. Again, it's going to require a lot of focus. This is one of those encounters, again, that's going to require lots of focus and lots of mechanics and knowing how the mechanics interact with each other. Right, so you're prioritizing those dispels, you're focusing on ads before bosses, you're dodging stuff. Right, look how much they have to move. They're dealing with that. They're going to be dealing with the controlled chaos in 10 seconds, and they're dealing with spores still. Like, it's a lot of the abilities do overlap, but you want to minimize how much they do overlap by dealing with them very quickly. So, yeah, this one in Star Augur, well, Star Augur I think is a lot easier. The Naturalist, we'll see how guilds fare with this one too. So, one thing that Blizzard did really well in general, though, is the difficulty of the bosses scales really well from easiest, Scorpion the first boss, to Gul'dan the last boss. It scales extremely well, and then the end wing bosses are, you know, really difficult as well. Yes, on time, it'll always be highlighted and YouTube, always. So for those of you who need to head out and go watch it afterwards. And always ask me questions. I'm always around. But yeah, that is, High Botanist in a nutshell. We have our own sort of strats here and diagrams and things like that. I'm more than happy to share them later on. But yeah, any questions about this one? Let me see here. No questions about High Botanist. We have 2 bosses to go then. We're making fantastic time. Amazing time. But yeah, High Botanist, pretty fun.